might have best been known, let's say in the 1970s. Well, artists, they're going to want to talk about what they're doing right now, this year. I've got to take them way back. And yeah, I know they've been talking about it for 40 years almost, right? But the fact is that people still want to hear about it, and we're going to see if we can dive into it a little bit deeper and get that story on tape, because that's what people want. And it really goes that way with any interview that you're doing. I think especially with authors, a lot of authors that we would interview on like a podcast, for example, we know them because they had one book, or we found out about them because of one book that really resonated with us, and we want to talk about that, and people want to talk about that or hear about it when they're listening. And the author has that balance of he's needing to talk about that, but he also wants to talk about his new stuff. But it's your job to be in control, because a lot of these guys they'll just run right over you. And it's
without meaning to.
Well, without meaning to.
They just don't know how to do it.
Well, and we need to say this too, is that you really are working with your guest. It's not like an us versus them thing. Your job is to make them look good. When they look good, you look good. What I like to tell people during the pre-interview is I say, listen, I'm like an attorney, and you're like my client, and you're up on the stand, and I'm going to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to talk about. You're going to know the questions, but I want to know where you're going with it, because I don't want any shocks that are going to make you look bad or something that I can't recover from.
Because you're guiding the interview and guiding the story.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. It's not that you don't want him to tell you anything that's a surprise, right? But you don't want him to go on some kind of crazy tangent that's going to get him the equivalent of more jail time or bore the hell out of your listeners.
And that kind of reminds me, and makes me want to point out, because you talked about beginning, middle, and end earlier, is that you need to have a point. Is if you talk to a guest about, how they grew up, and how, in my case, how they quit their job, and then how they market their business, and then how they live at home with their kids, like you're all over the place. I think the best interviews come in where the host has a point and something that they want to get out of the guest. And you take someone along this journey, but it's not a journey with like 1,000 tangents in it. And that also helps you title your show as well, and tell the listeners what's going to be coming up.
Well, I think it helps you get a deeper interview. When I started the BigBoldImpact.com podcast, the goal for me was to interview people that had probably already been interviewed. They're well-known people, authors, entrepreneurs, maybe even celebrities, we'll say. But I wanted to talk to them about one very specific thing and go deep on it. So I think that's one way of doing that, instead of just the general interview where you're pinging back and forth and just going, wherever the interview takes you. And sometimes it'll do that. I think that's fun to be able to do that. That's sometimes how conversations with friends are. But is that a great listener experience? Well, I don't know. It's certainly not as easy to target listeners when you have no idea where the thing's going to go. And I think a lot of these like make money, have success podcasts are like that. You'll see one day they're talking about make money with Google AdWords. The next day they're talking about affiliates. The next day they're talking about making money on Amazon Kindle. The next day it's about forums. The next day it's seminars. And it's like, whoa, you're going to get a whole lot better results for your people and yourself if you can really, really target in on one thing and just drill way deep with it.
Well, also that can fall under a category, but I definitely think within each show you need to, well, I like your approach, David, of going narrow and deep, going really deep with people, because as you said, a lot of these podcasts and interviews and radio shows are going wide and shallow. And if you can really bring it in narrow and deep, you're offering something that a lot of these other shows are not.
Well, I think they do that because the host, if we were to really get critical, and I mean that in a good way, of new podcasts that are coming up. A lot of these guys, in my opinion, don't really have any reason to be there. They are just not that established at business. They're not that established at really anything yet. But I think that you can get established.
Do you mean business podcasters or anyone podcasting?
I'm talking about business podcasters, because that seems to be the amount of new podcasts that are popping up. Most of them are in the business career, kind of quit your job, not unlike what we're doing, really. Mm-hmm. How to make more money and sell more stuff. But you've got these hosts that for God's sakes, guys, read a book. Get out there in the trenches. Don't just fake it just because you've got a nice mic that you bought. Get out there, learn what you're talking about so you can actually have a good conversation with these people and you can go deep. I did an interview with Seth Godin. We actually did this live. He came through for an event here and I was backstage with him. And at the very end, he said something that I'm never going to forget. He says, man, this is a great interview. Most people, we can't have a discussion like this. I was like, wow, that was a great compliment, especially coming from a guy like Seth Godin. But if you watch the interviews with him, people are asking him dumb-ass questions. And it's not doing him a service. It's not doing yourself a service because you've got a great opportunity. It's not doing your audience a service. So that's why you want to not only research the guest, but know what you're talking about in general before you jump in on this thing. You don't have to do it right now just because it's hot.
And something that always struck me about you, David, that you always do really well, and it's part of your personality, is being really curious about people and about things. And when you're a host, I think that curiosity really helps give you a better interview and create a better experience for your audience. It's that curiosity. It helps you research better. It helps you ask better questions. It helps you dive deeper. And that's something I've always admired about you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if that's just a Southern thing or not, but when I travel around, a lot of people have commented on that because I'll start a conversation with somebody in the post office line or the checkout girl, or we were doing it last night actually at we dropped by a Whole Foods and there was a woman, I heard her mention something from Minnesota. She was from Minnesota. Yeah, I'm from Minnesota. Well, how's this weather? It's getting real hot this summer, isn't it? Yeah, we were off. Talking about all sorts of things, like why she came into Nashville. And that maybe is something for us to look at in a future episode, because that's how you meet people. You never know who you're going to meet. I had a meeting with a guy today, a New York Times best-selling author, and that was just out of a conversation. That's how it started.
Well, I don't think curiosity is a Southern thing. I mean, we're both from Nashville, so I'm not as curious as you, but I think that's something that that I'm personally trying to get better at, and that you listening in today, you can get better at that quality as well.
Well, and what can go wrong, because it's on tape, the worst that can happen is they don't answer it in the way that you think needs to be answered, or they don't answer it at all. I think you and I both have that kind of quality in our relationship. Both of us, we made the agreement. We say, you tell me what you want and I'll say no.
Or yes.
Well, sometimes, but that's the thing.
You have veto power.
Yeah, you got veto power. I think people are scared of asking questions, and I think you should ask questions and demonstrate what it is that you want. Sometimes through a question, you never know. Most people are dying to talk about this stuff. Like, oh, that's a great question. I never get asked that.
And as a host, a lot of times I almost feel intimidated to ask the guest a question that might throw them off a little bit. I wouldn't ask something like, oh, what's your income this week? That's a little awkward. I wouldn't do that. But
well, here's the irony about it. We got a lot of these quote-unquote transparency guys. They love talking about that stuff. But if you ask them something else, like, hey, when you getting married? Oh, whoa, that's way too personal.
Yeah, so I feel a little intimidated. You don't know the person. You're asking stuff about them. But just, I say put it out there. And you'll get better at it. And if they don't want to answer it, you just move on to the next thing. Yeah.
Well, if you put your stuff out there, they'll know what they're getting into. When you go on a Rush Limbaugh or a Bill O'Reilly or a Howard Stern, you kind of know what you're getting into, right? Mm-hmm. There are no surprises there. So when you're putting your material out there, just be who you are and be consistent about it. And I think that will get you far. And that'll make you feel more comfortable about going with those big questions. So let's talk about, since we're getting to the end here, let's talk about what to do after the interview. Do you ever have people follow up with you, or do you follow up with your guest after you've done an interview with them?
I usually follow up via Twitter. And that's kind of my way to shoot out something to my audience. Like I usually say, I just had a great interview with such and such. Check out their website, or this is what they do, or something. So I just kind of follow up that way. And then when the episode comes out, I send them an email with the links and with summaries that they can post directly into Twitter or Facebook, just to make it really easy for them. What do you do?
Well, if I've talked to somebody about a specific subject, I like turning people on to new stuff. And if we talked about a subject, hey, I know this book that you might like. So I've sent out a lot of books. I will connect people with other people. Hey, you might be a great match for this guy, or here's another show that you might want to be on. So I'll connect people in that way. But yeah, certainly the very minimum, I'm going to tell them thank you and do what I can to send people their way.
And also, I think it's helpful if you did have a good experience with your guest to ask for a referral. Just say, here are the people that I'm looking for on my show. I really had a great time with you. Who's one person you would recommend that that would be a great fit for this show?
We do that all the time because on Music Business Radio, especially, music people know other music people, but it works on any kind of business that you're in. I mean, entrepreneurs know entrepreneurs, and people know like-minded people. So that's a fantastic thing. Also, if you're on a show, hey, do you know any other shows like yours that I might be good for? Mm-hmm. I find that most radio people, most podcasters know each other. They're hanging out at like the new media expos of the world, the conventions, podcast movements, and they know each other. So why not? Why not? I mean, if I can hook up somebody with a great guest and make them look good, that makes me look good.
Mm-hmm. I like it. I think that's all for today.
Speaking of after the show, we're almost there.
We're almost after our show?
Almost after. We got like a minute, and then it is going to be after, so we got to wrap it up here. redpodcast.com is the website. At that website, redpodcast.com, you can get in touch with me directly. You can get in touch with Laurel directly. You can listen to past episodes. We're doing a lot of episodes right now, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. We're starting out strong. Let's be honest here. We're just going all in.
But we're also very consistent, so expect this to continue. Laurel, thanks again.
Thank you, David. Great tips.
Another one, and we'll see you on redpodcast.com.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, Real Entrepreneur Development. Subscribe today using iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.